Hello, hello. We are live, guys. This is my first YouTube live, and we are covering the breaking news of the U.S. capturing former, some would say dictator, some would say president, um, Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela. So let's look into what's going on here. And I like to cover these details because my channel is primarily drone focused. Whether you are an aspiring drone pilot or run your own drone business, that is what I cover primarily. But each one of us has pretty diverse interests and backgrounds. And one of my own interests and backgrounds is in international policy. And I think it's good to consider these different things that are happening in the world. Just 2 days ago, on I believe it was on New Year's Eve, I had released a video about the U.S. attempting or conducting drone strikes in Venezuela. They had destroyed a boat dock area that drug traffickers were using, and we were kind of exploring that from the lens of a drone, kind of using drones for those things. And that was the entryway really into some of these international politics because drones are oftentimes the safe resort to use. You can really limit casualties and limit any sort of negative effects to U.S. military. So if you're going to do something covert, then it does make sense to go ahead and use drones for something like that. So that's kind of how we started looking at what's going on in Venezuela from that aspect. And we got our first viewers here, so thanks for jumping in, guys. This is the first time that I'm doing a live stream here. We're looking at the attacks here, the U.S. capture really of Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela. And so I was just saying how we're interested in drone applications. We're interested in how these tools are being used to improve things like, of course, entertainment, photos, videos, law enforcement, public safety. But one of the initial uses was, of course, military. And if you can exert your power abroad in a way where you're going to limit casualties, then it's a viable tool to do that. And I think we saw that 2 days ago when we found out about these drone strikes in Venezuela over on that dock um, for the folks who were doing the loading of drugs and things like that over there. So now we've kind of seen that this was really an overall pressure escalation campaign at large against Nicolas Maduro. And it's just so interesting that, we began by this whole situation began by those attacks onto those drug boats, the smugglers, right, going back and forth. They're being knocked out in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, far away in international waters, presumably, where I guess, the backlash and the blowout would have been low. And slowly, we saw this ramp up of pressure and escalating, right? And those drone strikes on those boats moved to naval blockades and the capture of oil tankers that were moving about. And then we saw, of course, more military might moving in, and then we saw that drone attack uh, that we found out about 2 days ago. So it's just so interesting to see the escalation here. And then we also found out from Secretary Rubio, right, the Secretary of State, that there had been back channels and communication with Nicolas Maduro, stating and giving him offers. It's, we had Secretary of State Rubio mentioning that Nicolas Maduro had been offered and his family had been offered some really enticing, I imagine, lucrative deals to leave leave the country or leave being in power there, and Maduro chose not to take that route, which is super. You know, that's the choice he went with there, and this is kind of the impact now, right? And it's just so it's no matter how you feel about what occurred, it's just incredible what occurred. Um, I think it's incredible that we see something right now in 2026, right, where you have this covert operation that occurred, and it occurred, right around the holidays, January 2nd, when people wouldn't really be considering these things to happen. And it's just incredible that something like that uh, happened. And I guess this is something that a lot of people grew up seeing, right? But we've been in a period where there was maybe less of this. There's, of course, the war on terror. And there we saw, of course, a lot of drone use. That was some of the first times we saw the applications of drones in a military setting. And, and then now this is maybe, of course, we have things going on in Ukraine and Gaza, Israel, but this is interesting to see that this is, I think, the first time we're seeing something here on the Western Hemisphere in such a long time. It almost harkens back to Cuba days, right, where we had the influence from USSR here in the Western Hemisphere. So that's super interesting to see. And there something that was interesting to me that I heard about. I think it was either Trump had mentioned this or maybe it was Rubio who had mentioned this, but they had mentioned the interplay between Iran and Venezuela. So one of the key reasons why the U.S. Presumably did this was because of the coziness and the relations there between Iran and and Venezuela there. And I believe there must have been like an oil sharing agreement there or some resource agreement there. There was also reference that maybe Venezuela was accepting Iranians to go into Venezuela. And I'm not just talking about like normal folks, right? We're not just talking about day to day people who are just trying to survive. You have that in Venezuela, you have that in Iran, you have incredibly great, good, normal people in every single country. But we're talking about maybe malicious actors or people at the top who are just benefiting from being in power. And so they created this system where essentially, yeah, you're controlling the whole country and you're reaping the benefits. And you've pretty much undone all the investment that and build up that so many generations have put into a country for your own benefit. So it's kind of like running a company and then just draining it for your own good and for your own personal benefit. So I guess we're seeing kind of the results of that now, where Maduro has been extradited and is on his way back to the U.S. and will face charges. I'm not aware of the full charges that Maduro is going to face here. I have not been following this in up to date, but I did take some notes from the CNN or the press release that President Trump and Secretary of State Rubio had just put on here. And let's see. So some key things that I took away from this press meeting here at the White House was that Maduro has been indicted on several counts, uh, and that the European Union, the U.S. I'm not sure if they mentioned the UN, but let's just say a lot of countries do not recognize Maduro as the president of the country. Uh, they let Iran in, is what I heard here, and then they've just been seizing this oil. So if you listen to uh, that press meeting there, oil is mentioned so many times there. And I think it was so telling when President Trump went up to finally go and speak. When I think it was the second thing that came out of his mouth as far as a talking point was about the oil, and it was about how there had been so much invested there, and then it had been seized, and that this is something that ha- has happened, and needed to be done years ago. Um, and of course, the perspective there from the administration is that, and from our executive leaders, is that they were the only ones to go and do this, and to guys, I guess, have the courage to do this, whether you agree or not. Action was taken, and it is interesting to see action taken when when a lot of times I think people who try to be, the good guys can be taken advantage of. And then you do have other folks who are willing to take action and to push the boundaries and to use force. And so I think it's really interesting to see that, when you try to attempt change and negotiations through all the means you have possible in a way that is not through force, that there has been this example here where force has been used, and there was a capture here. And I think something that was really interesting that Marco Rubio stated was that this was a law enforcement action of an indicted criminal. So they really want to make this clear. This was not a military action, although in order to have this law enforcement action take place, you had to have the full force of and coordination of the U.S. military, the intelligence community, and then, of course, the law enforcement. So I think if you guys saw, there was a photo of Nicolás Maduro that President Trump had posted onto Truth Social there. And I think that's the only place that that photo exists and it shows Nicolás Maduro with the blindfolds and then the ear protection, right? So you're taking away sight there. You're taking away the ability to hear what's going on. You're really dampening someone's own senses there to know what's going on. And then in the back, you see someone with the DEA kind of jacket or maybe a bulletproof vest there, and it says DEA. So it really was and then they're on the USS Iwo Jima. So it's just this whole combination of power and coordination to carry out this action, which is again, I think no matter where you fall and what happened, it was an incredible action that occurred just in the ability to carry this out and to do this covertly, even with this mounting pressure campaign. It's just so interesting that we saw something like this happen so close to our part of the world, when for the past 2 decades we've been used to seeing this sort of activity only in the news and hearing about it. And maybe some of you guys watching have served abroad or have family that's served abroad and that's been closer, to them out in the Middle East. But this is really something that I think for the first time in a while we've seen something closer to home, which is really interesting to see and to experience here. Something else here that I picked up from what President Trump had said is he said he wants to take back the oil we should have taken years ago. So again, this really does come back to those injustices that occurred with the oil industry there, which is, in that last video that I posted about the drone strikes in Venezuela, where we were exploring whether this was really about the drug cartels or if this was something else. If this was about, China or some other malicious adversary or bad actor. And it just like this press conference just cut through to it. And it just says, I think Trump probably said the word oil, maybe definitely over 10 times, maybe 20 times. Whereas someone like Rubio mentioned the word criminal, maybe 5 to 10 times and it indicted. So in law enforcement, right? So you can see through each one of these lenses kind of how they wanted to frame what was going on here. So that's but I think it's pretty clear. Like, not only did places like Europe and the US and maybe the UN, I don't know if they ever did, but not recognize Maduro as the standing president, but then there was actually action taken. So, would the US or would another country do this if there wasn't something to gain? Probably not, right? Like, we're not, you have to do the risk reward calculation there. And it's like, okay, well, something that I picked up, there was one of the last, I think 5 questions of that press conference. Someone asked President Trump, how is this putting America first? How is going and capturing someone in Venezuela and doing all this in Venezuela putting America first? And when I heard that, I was like, oh man, that's kind of a tough question. At least I would have definitely struggled with that. And then again, no matter how you fall on whether this was good or bad or what you think about our executive branch right now, the response I thought was pretty smart in that President Trump said, I am putting America first by considering who our neighbors are. And I thought that was super, super smart to do because, you know, if you live in the US now, you're always thinking about like how bad some of the downtowns have gotten. You're thinking about, if you've been in San Francisco recently, or here in Seattle or Portland, like you have these zones where you just can't go anymore because they're basically shanty towns of people who are, yes, they're homeless, but they've perhaps chosen a life of drug addiction and kind of living this life where you're not going to try to work, try to put a roof over your head. You're just going to, you know, I guess, carry on with the life that you have, which might be one of addiction. And we think about that on a micro level, on the city level, or even the neighborhood level. Like, is my home next to a place that I want to be by, or I want my family or kids to be by? And then on the macro level, we heard from the executive branch today say that, hey, we are putting the U.S. first by thinking about who our neighbors are, and we want to make sure that our neighbors are good people who aren't letting like random regimes or malicious regimes like Iran, which was mentioned here, or even China. So I thought that was a smart response there. Again, no matter where you guys fall on this, whether this is a correct action or not to take, or what you think of the executive branch right now, I'm pretty indifferent. I like to just look at things as isolated uh, events or kind of decisions, and that's how I like to do things because I think things are pretty multifaceted, and I can definitely agree with some actions that are taken and disagree with others. I do not take a blanket approach to anything, but that's just because I like to question everything to my own detriment sometimes. So let's see, what else did I take note of here from the press conference? There was the last question. One of the final questions too was, "Are we going to have boots in the ground?" And then the the funny response there from Trump was, "We're going to have boots in the ground in regards to oil." And so it sounds like there's going to be, an exodus of oil experts going in and building out that infrastructure there. How are they going to keep this place secure? How are they going to keep it from falling into chaos? How do they ensure that they have the military on their side and there's not going to be any sort of action against that oil industry as it's being built up, or any other industry that's being built up? I don't know. Um, I assume there must have been so much back channel communication with military leaders on the ground there in Venezuela, asking, so, if this were to happen, how would you feel about this? Or if this were to happen, how would you, what do you think, that there would be a rebellion, or do you think that there would be some massive uprise, things like that? I'm sure so much of that was already understood in the calculus here before going in. So that's going to be interesting to see how security is maintained in this area, especially as they're trying to build out these oil assets in Venezuela now. So because those are not cheap, I think we heard from Trump there that there's going to be billions and billions invested in from the oil companies, and that a lot of that is going to be, I guess, paid off by whatever comes out from those new refineries and things like that. Yeah, guys. So this was just breaking news here. I'm going to keep chatting here for a bit. This is my first live stream. Um, it's cool to get this up and running. I hope it's working on your end over there. And again, I cover all things kind of drone policy, but it's mostly, it is mostly for drone pilots and people looking to improve their drone skills. And whether it's just as a hobbyist, or you're a creator, or you're doing this as a business, or you're looking to get into the business, or you're just curious about drone policy at large, or international policy as it relates and kind of interweaves with some of these things. My background is a mix of international relations. I did study government and international relations over in my own university. So if you guys don't know, my background is in poli sci over at Harvard, and then I went into marketing for tech companies for a bit. Just given when I graduated, that market was exploding, so the opportunities were really exciting. And then I wondered what would it be like to go and serve and apply kind of what I'd always wanted to do, and some of that my natural interest in international relations and learning about others and serving the U.S. in some capacity. I went and I accomplished that goal, and so I was excited to do that. And as you guys all know, I worked in the national security intelligence uh, sector there, and I did that, and it was definitely eye opening. And now that I've kind of left the government, I've gotten deeper into drones, and it's just my side is more from the marketing side and the branding side, and I've always had a natural inclination to hear about like, okay, what's going on the international side of things? How are these things being used? So that's kind of how I look at things here. All right, guys, I'm gonna leave it there. This was my first live stream. Thank you so much for jumping in here. Um, I want to see how this looks on the back end, see if this thing actually saved. And thanks for joining me. If you came and listened to this live stream, I will continue to do a mix of these kind of like international events and policies with drones and things like that. But I'll also keep the regular content about uh, running a drone business and your drone tips. All right, guys, thanks so much. You have a wonderful rest of your weekend here, and I will catch you guys later.